Hello viewers. So I'm back again with another video, and this time we'll learn OAuth 2.0. So this is series of video that we are doing for SSO, and we'll see everything related to SSO. So today we'll learn OAuth 2.0, and this will be kind of introductory video. And we are from Software Circle. We advocate free e-learning. So what is in the agenda today? So today we'll learn what is OAuth 2.0, why to use OAuth 2.0. We'll also see what is the workflow of OAuth, then what are the different roles of OAuth, and we'll also see what are the disadvantages and advantages, and at the end we'll see what is access token which is provided by OAuth. Now here OAuth 2.0, so there are two versions. So the earlier version has some bug. That's why the newer version OAuth 2.0 is used for last few years. So now what is OAuth 2.0? OAuth 2.0 is an open authorization protocol which allows accessing the resources of the resource owner by enabling the client application on HTTP services such as Google, Facebook, GitHub, etc. So it is an authorization protocol, not authentication. So there is a difference between authentication and authorization. Authentication means with username and password, you log into the system, that is authentication. But what resource will be allocated to you, that is authorization. So OAuth 2.0 is used for authorization purpose, not authentication purpose. So this is very important difference. Now, OAuth allows sharing of resources stored on one site to another site without using their credentials. It uses token instead. So it doesn't use username password, it uses tokens. It works by delegating user authentication to the service that hosts the user account and authorizing the third-party application to access the user account. OAuth provides authorization flow for web and desktop applications and mobile devices. Now, why to use OAuth? So we can use OAuth to read data of a user from another application. It supplies the authorization workflow for web, desktop application, and mobile devices. It is a server-side web app that uses authorization code and does not interact with the user credentials. It is easier to implement and provide stronger authentication. It has ability to share data for users without having to release personal information. It allows limited access to the user's data and allows accessing when authorization token expire. Now we'll see some basic workflow of OAuth. So there are 3-4 components that is involved: application, then the user resource owner, authorization server, and resource server. So what happens in first step? Authorization request is sent from application to the user, then authorization is granted, and after the grant of authorization, access token is sent to the client application, and using that access token, the application asks the resource server to give the resources, and resources is returned. So OAuth 2.0 workflow we'll see now. First of all, the application requests authorization to access service resource from the user. If the user authorizes the request, the application receives an authorization grant. The application requests an access token from the authorization server by presenting the authentication of its own identity and the authorization grant. If the application identity is authenticated and the authorization grant is valid, the authorization server issues an access token to the application. Authorization is complete. The application requests the resource from the resource service API and presents the access token for the authentication. If the access token is valid, the resource server serves the resource to the application. So in a typical application, suppose I have an application and which needs to access my resource on Google or Facebook. So for that, user access the resources using the client application. Client app gives the client ID and PWD password to log in via Google, Facebook, Twitter, etc. In the third step, user logs into the client app via Facebook, Google, etc. and redirects the user with URI and authentication code. User accesses the page located at the redirect URI. Client application sends authentication code, client ID, and password to authorization server. And in the step 7, authentication application returns the access token. And finally, user logs in and accesses the resource of the resource owner. So these are very protected resource. Whatever is authorized, only that resource will be accessed by the client app, not everything. Now we'll see what is OAuth 2.0 roles, different roles that is available in OAuth. So first is the resource owner, who is the user. The resource owner is the user who authorizes the application to access their account. The application's access to the user's account is limited to the scope of the authorization grant, that is read or write access. Then the resource or authorization server. This is the second role. So the resource server hosts the protected user accounts and the authorization server verifies the identity of the user, then issues access token into the application. From an application developer point of view, a service API fulfills both the resource and the authorization server roles. We will refer to both of these roles combined at the services or API role. And the third role is the client or the application. The client is the application that wants to access the user's account. Before it may do so, it must be authorized by the user and the authorization must be validated by the API. Now, what are the different disadvantages related to OAuth? So if you are adding more extension at the end in the specification, it will produce a wide range of non-interoperable implementations, which means you have to write separate piece of code for Facebook, Google, and any third-party servers. And the second disadvantage that I think is if your favorite sites are connected to the central hub and the central account is hacked, then it will lead to the serious effects across several sites instead of just one. Now we will see what is access token, which is given after the grant of a user. So an access token is a string that identifies a user, an application, or a page. The token includes information such as when the token will expire and which app created that token. First, it is necessary to acquire OAuth 2.0 client credentials from API console. Then the access token is requested from the authorization server by the client. It gets an application access token from the response and sends the token to the API that you wish to access. Now, following are the parameters and their descriptions, which is associated with the token. Client ID, redirect URI, and the response type. Client ID, it should be set of the client ID of your application. Redirect URI, it should be the set of URL. After the request is authorized, the user will be redirected back. And the response type, it can either be a code or a token. The code must be used for server-side applications, whereas the token must be used for the client-side application. In server-side application, you can make sure that the secrets are saved safely. So that's the end of OAuth introduction. This was the introductory video for OAuth 2.0. And if you find the video helpful, informative, please like the video and subscribe the channel. If you have not watched our other videos, do go and watch the videos. And if you find that information is helpful, please like the video and subscribe the channel. Thank you so much.